As we begin our moment of prayer, it's good to think of the likes of John Morrison and all those who've served, who've gone before us. And for myself and for those of the local community, to thank you for all that you do in our community, because you are all truly servants of our community. So on behalf of the Borough of Maidstone, I thank John for what he did, and I also thank you for your continued service. Let us pray. So on behalf of all faith groups in our society, let us pray for the Borough of Maidstone and for all our leaders. We pray for forgiveness for what we've done wrong and encouragement to follow our convictions. Bless our Queen and all members of government, that they may lead our country wisely with righteousness and justice and with firm conviction of what they are called to do. Strengthen our democratic beliefs in freedom, tolerance of others, accepting personal and social responsibility, respecting and holding the law, and working together for the common good of our country and all that is entrusted to us. At this Easter time, give us courage to say and do what we honestly believe, to protect the weak and vulnerable, the sick and those flagging through despair. We pray for our town of Maidstone, for areas of violence and hostility, and for those who would struggle to find joy this day. Guide our council and our nation through the inspiration of our faith, that a deeper understanding of each other's needs may put an end to discord and bitterness, and enable us to be more creative in our thought and actions. And finally, give us grace to rebuild bonds of trust, so that together we may work for dignity and flourishing of all here in the Borough of Maidstone. Amen.
These proceedings will be webcast and recorded by the Council. but will anybody else be recording or filming them? I ask so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. I take it there's nobody. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2. I have received apologies for absence from Councillors Atkinson, Ells, Garland, Mrs Grigg, Lewin, McLaughlin, Robinson, J. Sams, T. Sams, Webster and Wilby. Agenda item 3. Are there any applications for dispensations? No. Agenda item 4. Are there any disclosures of disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests by members? Tony Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to inform you that I'm currently duty officer and I'm dealing with a few issues. So if I suddenly leave, it's nothing you've said. It might be something they've said, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. If you've got to leave, you've got to leave, sir. And that's it. Thank you. Are there any other disclosures by officers?
No, Mr Mayor.
Nope. Okay. Agenda item 5. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? Nope. Thank you. Agenda item 6. Is it agreed that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 7. This is on page 117. Are the minutes of the meeting of the Borough Council held on the 7th of March 2018 agreed as a correct record? Thank you. Mayor's announcements. We've had a full diary over the last period since the last meeting, and apart from the official engagements, I've been working on my promises to fulfil my obligations to my 3 charities to deliver projects for them. Among my engagements have been visits to Biggin Hill and the Royal Observatory, both very, very interesting. I attended the Lord Lieutenant's service in Canterbury Cathedral and also attended 2 performances of Handel's Creation, both of which were very good. It just shows the amount of talent we do have in Maidstone, that we've got 2 choirs that actually put on absolutely first class. It was brilliant. We also visited the tattoo extravaganza, which I must say I was a bit kind of sceptical about, but it's very, very impressive. But I did resist the temptation of an offer to give me a couple of tattoos. But all I'd say is that the people that actually do the tattoos, they are really, really talented people, and it was well worth. Last week, we accepted an invitation from the Mayor of Beauvais to take part in the commemoration of the signing of the treaty to end World War I. The treaty was signed in the Town Hall of Beauvais on April the 3rd, 1918. We were asked to take some young people with us, and so it was a good opportunity to take 4 of our Sea Cadets, one of whom is the Mayor's cadet. There were 2 boys, 2 girls, and if I say they were an absolute credit to the Sea Cadet unit in Maidstone, also to themselves, to their parents, they were absolutely brilliant. They were so smart and disciplined, as when they walked into the room, which was slightly larger than this, must have been 150 delegates from all over the world, they all stopped talking as they marched in, and it was an absolute credit. As they come in, they took their positions alongside the dais, lowered the flags and so forth, and the number of people that actually come up to me at the end said, "That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for helping make the occasion." And so I'd say to the Sea Cadets, one of my charities, absolutely first class. On Friday afternoon, I hosted a reception for Judge Carey, who retires shortly, and also for the outgoing High Sheriff George Jessel, both of whom are gentlemen and have been very supportive of Maidstone, and I believe that all who attended agreed it was a very fitting tribute to both of them. As my time draws to a close, I've got about a month to do so, they tell me, of my sentence. Sorry about that. I have two more events. Next week we're hosting a day out in Maidstone, which includes a short trip on the Kentish Lady, and I do believe we have a record number of mayors and other districts attending, so the boat is near enough full. On May the 13th, I'm hosting a concert in All Saints Church, where almost 150 performers will be raising the roof. As you most likely know, that the church needs a bit of repair, and so what we're doing, we're putting this concert on, and 50% of the takings will go to the church restoration fund, and 50% will go to my three charities. This should be a spectacular celebration of the talent that we have in Maidstone, and I hope that you will support. I'm now working on trying to finish my three projects for my three charities. Just a quick run through. Refurbishment of the garden in Maidstone Hospital for the lung awareness is basically complete. Just needs a little painting, of which will be done in the next week. And that is absolutely outstanding, the work. And what the architect did relating to the design is absolutely fantastic. And we're going to open that on May the 12th. I've turned the first sod at the garden at Blackthorn Trust, and work should begin very shortly. We've been held up by the weather, as I think most people who work outside, developers, etc., have been. The pontoon for the Sea Cadets, as I say, has been a major job, taking that over from those that have been involved in the past. So all I'd say, I've built football stadiums quicker and with less problems. However, I do believe that we're now on the final stretch, and this should be completed by the end of May. I know the cadets cannot wait for this, and I'm sure this will attract more young people to join this wonderful group of young people. We're hoping, if I got it correct, to open this beginning of July. And I have also got a colleague who's going to purchase 5 number canoes. So when we hand this over, it will be the complete entity, the pontoon, the entrance, and some canoes. Thank you. Just a few other items. As we've got the elections coming up, we've got people standing down. We've got others that are going for re-election. Those that are standing down, I thank you very much for your input over many, many years. And it has been a pleasure working with you. Those that are going for a re-election, irrespective of what colour you are, I wish you all the very best. I hope the weather changes, because there's nothing worse than delivering leaflets, etc., in the rain. So I hope it goes well for you all. One of those young lads that's standing down is Derek Butler. Derek Butler is a ward councillor of mine in Boxley, and Derek has worked tirelessly over the years, and I can understand that when you get to his age, you've got to retire. So, but he does really have a very, very first-class lady behind him that's got to make sure that he's still got plenty to do. Perhaps in his retirement he would perfect his singing, because he's a pretty good singer, but he really does need to get on the ball and get it going a bit. During my year of tramping Kent with my engagements, a number of mayors have mentioned past mayors, and Derek has been mentioned as the gentle mayor. Now, that hasn't just come from one person, that's come from quite a lot. The gentle mayor, he's done a fantastic job, and I'm not just saying that because he's sitting there, but he has paid me dearly. But it's interesting that people do remember the work that Derek's done. Derek's been a solid councillor. He's worked on those committees which don't really appeal to me, audit, etc. And I think anybody that can get involved in audit and so forth have got to be solid guys. It's not a job that you get many pats on the back for. But anyway, thank you so much, Derek. I think Derek is looking at me, and we've got he wants to speak as well. My God, this boy. There's a drink party after this. So in the Beauvais room, directly after, Derek is putting on a three-course lunch for everybody. But anyway, Derek, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll repeat some of what you said, but as this is my last full council meeting as a borough councillor, you're invited to have a drink with me after the meeting in the Beauvais room. I've witnessed a number of difficult issues faced by the borough and the residents of Maidstone during my time as councillor. The Kent International Gateway, the planning application and the subsequent court hearing, and then all the work relating to delivering the local plan, and not to forget the widespread flooding in the low-lying areas of the borough during the 2013-14 winter. There have been many more challenges, and there are many more to come. I do know, though, that there is a great team of councillors, officers and staff who look after the interests of the people of Maidstone and who will face up to and overcome these difficult challenges. I've enjoyed my time as a borough councillor, and I wish all of you my best wishes. My highlight was being the Mayor of Maidstone 2016-17. I recommend that any one of you who has the opportunity to be the Mayor to grasp it, as it is a truly wonderful experience and an honour to represent the borough. My thanks go to the clerks, chairmen and councillors of Boxley Parish Council and Bredhurst Parish Council for all the support and help they have given me. Also thanks to my fellow ward members, Councillor Malcolm Greer and Councillor Wendy Hinder, also for their help and support. I could thank each and every one of you, but I must mention the mayoral team who made my time and my wife Mary's time as Mayor and Mayoress most memorable, and who continue to support Councillor Malcolm Greer, the current Mayor, and Councillor David Nagy, the Deputy Mayor. My sincere thanks go to Julie, Russell, Ray and Faye. Many thanks to all of you, so please join me later in the Beauvais room. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek, and I thank you for your support during the year. It's been absolutely brilliant. There is just one item I need to mention to you. It's a first, I do believe, that, as you know, the mayoral car, I've broken it during my reign, and we had to use my car one day, and I don't know it's the first time, but the mayor has chauffeured the chauffeur. Now, I won't tell you which one it is, but it's all I'd say. His Christian name begins with R. Thank you very much. Cheers. And don't forget the drinks already in there for you. I call upon Councillor Harper, who wishes to pay tribute to John Morrison, former member of Maidstone Borough Council, who died recently.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This tribute is abridged from the service of remembrance for John and Marina, which the Mayor and myself attended and spoke. And the reason I'm dressed up in a suit tonight, which is a rarity for you all, is because it's in respect of John, who always believed when he was a councillor that people should dress up. Times have changed a bit, and I'm afraid I personify that. But anyway, John and Marina were lifelong socialists and always both loyal to the Labour Party and their friends, and had witnessed the rise of the 1945 government. In good times and bad, they remained loyal to their beliefs, their party, and also Maidstone, their hometown. I researched our council election results all the way back to 1973, when it was founded, and John stood for Labour 10 times in that period, and Marina 3. And from 1980 to 2002, John was a Labour councillor for Parkwood, winning 6 consecutive elections. John managed to keep Parkwood a solid Labour seat for the 22 years through the hard work he did in the community, helping residents with housing and benefit problems, and working closely with the Parkwood Residents Association, who thought very highly of him. After Parkwood, John moved to Fant and was a councillor for a year from 2000 to 2003. John did not like public speaking, but he always managed to make his voice and views known. Indeed, and I quote, Maidstone Conservative councillor Paulina Stockwell has fond memories of John as a very popular councillor and a real gentleman. And it was very nice when I received those thoughts from Paulina. Marina was a rock on which John was able to devote so much time to being a councillor. She was one of our Labour Party's unsung heroes, helping John win elections, standing herself 3 times in Bridge and Allington, and finally making her last attempt in 1984. My own memories of John are relatively recent. He was the chair of the Fant and Bridge Labour Party from 2004 to 2013, and he interviewed and quizzed me when I arrived from Mitcham and what I could do for the branch to get it to victory. I clearly passed the grade, and every year I used to deliver to John and Marina at their house in Bower Place their regular steak which they put up. And even when John had moved into the flats above the library, he used to phone up Keith and say, I want my steak, to put it up in the window. In 2014, when I got elected to the council, John sent me a nice letter of congratulations, and he did that for Keith in 2016. So just finally, really, I'd just like to say that in their passing, we've lost 2 stalwarts in terms not only of the Labour Party, but also of Maidstone, and a rare breed of people who devoted long parts of their life to public service. And I think their inspiration probably lives on not just within the Labour Party, but most people here who continue to give time and energy to public service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I did attend that at the funeral, and the number of people that were there, just say thank you. It was very, very good. Moving on, agenda item 9, petitions. There are no petitions this evening. Agenda item 10, questions and answer sessions from members of the public. There are no questions from members of the public this evening. Agenda item 11, questions from council members. I have received notice that Derek Mortimer wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of Policy and Resources Committee. Mr Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can the Chairman of the Policy and Resources Committee update members on her recent discussions with the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government on permitted development rights? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I went with David Dukes, the leader of Tunbridge Wells, and Nick Heslop, the leader of Tunbridge and Malling, to see Sajid Javid, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, a few weeks back. And the subject was specifically to deal with permitted development rights. They're affecting several boroughs quite adversely in Kent, and actually Maidstone is one of the most severely being affected at the moment. We're losing wholesale office blocks. Just especially in the town centre. And so it has a double effect. First of all, we are losing the business rates, and as everybody here knows, increasingly we're having to rely on business rates and the local tax to cover our services, and so we can ill afford to lose office premises to residential development, and yet we are losing a lot. And I asked if I could find a total figure for you, but it's done by ward. And as High Street ward is probably the worst affected, I've got the figures for that, and it might shock you. So we've had 289 homes completed, and we have another 300 under development at the moment, all in this tiny area, and we have some outside as well. So in addition to the loss of business rates, because it's permitted development, we're not getting Section 106 contributions for infrastructure, which would have been forthcoming under the normal development process. I asked officers if they could give me a ballpark figure for what that actually meant. And if you took what's happened and in the pipeline and put it aside a similar development under normal circumstances, the ballpark figure I've been given is that for the 589 homes, 710,000 would have been lost in 106 monies for education, youth services, libraries and health services, and that does not take into account contributions that would potentially also be forthcoming for highways, affordable housing and off-site open space. So that's the background for us anyway, as to why we felt it was really important to go and speak to Sajid Javid. All three boroughs had applied for the removal of permitted development rights through the placement of an Article 4 direction, and all three had been refused, so we were sort of stuck with it. We've got an additional problem in Maidstone, or an issue, it's not, and that's that London boroughs, who've been given additional funds to assist with their own homeless situation, have managed to outbid Maidstone and are either purchasing or leasing many of these properties themselves, and none of their additional monies follow. None of it's passported to us here. So I think you can imagine the strain that is being put on our already overstretched schools and health facilities such as doctors' surgeries. Sajid Javid clearly sees permitted development rights as a tool in solving the housing crisis. He clearly sees that. And he emphasised that in relation to infrastructure, he had put in place the Housing Infrastructure Fund, which is a capital grant programme totalling £5 billion. That's not just for Maidstone, clearly, wish it was, but for the country as a whole. He had been well briefed about Maidstone in particular, and he acknowledged that we were one of the worst affected areas in Kent, if not the worst affected. All three councils are now reapplying for exemption, and he clearly wouldn't say whether we'd be successful or not, but he did do what he could to say that to simplify and speed up the process, because it's quite a tortuous process. So how did we feel at the end of the meeting? We thought it was better than we had expected. He clearly had been well briefed. He's not going to change his mind about the need for permitted development rights. They do see it as a primary tool. But I think he was a little bit surprised at how in Tunbridge Wells, for example, it's not just losing them business rates, it's actually meaning that the price of office blocks is going up and actually pushing businesses out. You know, not only can people not afford them, it's actually pushing existing businesses out. But for us, the issue, that's there too, but the issue primarily is that it's going to this housing without any of the commensurate infrastructure to come in. So he emphasised the fund, and he did say that he would do what he could to speed up the process for exemption. And I'm keeping my fingers and toes crossed that this time we'll be successful, because I personally think we've taken our fair whack now and can ill afford to lose many more under permitted development rights. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mrs Wilson. Councillor Mortimer, Do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. Regarding the planning and infrastructure that you mentioned there, could you possibly elaborate on what the consequences will be for Maidstone, probably in the fairly near future, if we have to go down the line that they're proposing at the moment?
Well, the first thing to say is that officers here have already tried to hook into it wherever they can. So we did make a bid for Maidstone East to something called the, I've got to write this down so I remember the exact terminology, so to the Marginal Viability Fund stream. This funding stream within the Housing Infrastructure Fund is available to all single and lower tier local authorities with the specific purpose of providing a piece of infrastructure funding to get additional sites allocated for housing or unblock existing sites quickly. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful, but it has had one good result in that Homes England have become more engaged with the Maidstone East project. What's of concern is that it's 100% clear that the bids to the Housing Infrastructure Fund will only be successful if it helps to unlock new housing. So any bid attempting to sort out existing infrastructure problems will not satisfy the criteria, and that is a great pity in many ways. I don't think I need to spell it out, what that means in terms of easing existing pressures on school, social services, health provision, or the transport infrastructure. All Kent district leaders, with one exception, are spelling out the same message. And that is that this county, it's not just Maidstone, this county is grinding to a standstill, and there is a substantial shortfall in the funding needed to provide the necessary infrastructure to support its existing and growing population. And the problem allied to this is that there's not joined up thinking. So just to give you one example, we supported when the consultation came out, we supported the need for the Lower Thames crossing. That was supported, again with one exception, across Kent with all the districts, and we supported it too. But Highways England are only talking about that crossing. They're not talking about how you access it. And it's quite clear it's going to affect several districts, and actually Maidstone quite seriously. It's going to affect us because you've got to get to a crossing and you've got to leave it. On the Essex side, there's two roads, and it's coming into a wider tunnel. I mean, it's ludicrous. And they're just not listening. So we can't actually put money into some of our forward plans for improvements and hope to get the money out of development unless they say there's a need for it. And all the Kent districts, again, have been saying the same things. So we've got a problem in that the funding that's there is to unlock new homes, but we've already got a serious situation, and we've certainly got it in Maidstone, with actually needing quite a lot of funding for existing situations. And Kent County Council, I can't remember the exact figure, but Kent County Council has actually done a significant piece of work on that, to actually say what the total is actually across Kent, and it's severe. Actually we're grinding to a halt in Kent, slowly but surely, unless we get some funding. So really it's saying we'll use this fund as much as we can, but actually it's going to mean that we'll get more housing. If we're successful in a bid, it means we get more housing growth with it, and that's the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Wilson. Councillor Mortimer. There are no questions to Chairman of other committees. Agenda item 12, current issues. I call upon the Leader of the Council to submit her report on current issues. Councillor Wilson, you may speak for 5 minutes.
Well, first of all, it's end of term, really, as far as we're concerned. So I'd like to thank you, first of all, Mr Mayor, for the work you've done, and also for keeping this unruly bunch in order for an entire year. And like you, I'd like to, well, there's another thing, I'd like to thank everybody, officers, councillors, who have worked so hard this year to actually try and find common ground so that we can actually move the council forward. Because with a hung council, that is very difficult, no mean feat, and a lot of people across all political groups have worked to try and do that. Also to say farewell to those who are leaving us, and thank you for your contribution. I want to indulge myself a bit, and I want to mention somebody who's leaving us on our own side, and that's Councillor Willis. The issue is he knows he drives me to distraction. It's no secret. And it's also true to it's also true to say that officers on the 4th floor have seen me when they've come to say, could I ring him, or could he come in and talk to me? Put my head in my hands and groan out loud. It's true. However, I don't know another councillor who is so assiduous in actually looking into things properly, and actually is like a terrier with a bone and won't let them go until they're resolved. And I have not forgotten the day when he appeared at my office with a sheaf of papers, and this is what I really want to talk about. When he arrived at my office with a sheaf of papers, pointed to some tiny print in the middle of one A4 page, said, "Have you picked up on this, Fran?" And this was what was happening with the rail franchise offers, the bids, how it had been framed. Frankly, I hadn't picked up on it, and at that point neither had anybody else. We were all fixated on the delay in the services that had been proposed or promised at Maidstone East, and also what we put into the local plan and into the transport, both Kent County Council and ourselves, saying that we wanted the high-speed service extended throughout the day. What was actually in this bid was about the proposed Crossrail service, the Abbey Wood Crossrail service, and the worry that the way it was framed looked as though we could end up with that and lose everything else. And from that point on, everybody was galvanised. Well, if I hadn't been galvanised into action, he would have had a pitchfork up my backside, I know. But everybody was galvanised into action. Kent County Council, Maidstone Borough Council, our MPs, our officers, cross-party here, and the business community too, in particular, to actually fight to say that it was really important that we got the promised service, that we kept the high-speed service. And yes, it would be nice to have the Crossrail service through Abbey Wood, but it could not be a substitute for what we already have. That is not on the cards. I was very pleased to hear, actually, that Chris Grayling had come to Maidstone a relatively few days ago, and listened very carefully to what was written and said that he had said. And so it was pleasing to hear him say that Maidstone will have a good service, will not suffer. But what he significantly didn't say was what that service would be. And I understand why he needs the Crossrail service from Abbey Wood to succeed, but I'm not prepared to have it succeed at the expense of Maidstone Borough Council. So what I'm really asking everybody is not to take the foot off the accelerator. We continue to need to actually campaign. We continue to need to make our case very, very strongly in Maidstone, and it needs to be everybody, as it has been up till now, making it 100% clear that we need the service we have been promised, which has been delayed, and we cannot lose the service, I know it's not high speed from Maidstone, but you know what I mean. We cannot lose the high-speed service that we currently have either. It would be a disaster. The business community are very, very clear that people have moved here on the strength of both of those services being in Maidstone, and other businesses are saying that they intend or are thinking of moving here. So we've got to keep the pressure on the Minister to say, yes, happy to take the additional, but not at the expense of what we've already got and what we've already been promised. And my time's exactly up. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Leader. Well timed. I now call upon other group leaders to respond. You have 5 minutes. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, members. First of all, I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Wilson has said about thanks to the officers, in particular to you, Mr Mayor. We are very lucky that we get your support and the officers' support, and personally, I think we all very much appreciate that. Sometimes I know we can be a pain in the backside, and you probably think that, but believe me, we do appreciate what you do. Just take the point that's just been made by Councillor Wilson. I did take the point, actually, of speaking directly with the Secretary of State on this, and my words were pretty similar to what you said, that we must all stand together and support this. And certainly I made it very clear that we wanted a high-speed rail service from Maidstone and not messing about changing at Abbey Wood. And whether he took it on board or not, you never know with these things, but we certainly made that point. You did say that it's a bit of an end-of-term feeling, and I do understand that. And I think one of the worst-kept secrets, dare I say this, that there will be a probability a new leader on the Liberal Dem side, and a new deputy leader as well, as I understand it. And obviously this is very, very important. Now, I don't mean to raise Europe, but I'm going to just say one thing. I think one of the greatest European leaders in history was Frederick the Great of Prussia. Now, Frederick had a very strong, he was a diplomat, a soldier, and a scholar. And what he did say was that he was the servant of his people. And that's a very important word, because I think, Councillor Wilson, I'm not going to attribute all the things that Frederick did to yourself, because that would be rather over an exaggeration in Maidstone Borough Council. But I will say this, that you've been definitely the first servant of this borough, and I think that's a very important role as leader of the opposition and as leader of the council. And I think it's something we all very much appreciate. I know myself, we meet fairly regularly, and I've always enjoyed our chats. I think we put the world to rights sometimes. And one thing I have learnt, I think, that we have our differences, and there always will be differences, because we come from slightly different views. But nevertheless, we do have a lot in common as well, and I think quite often we forget that we do have more in common than we do have in disagreement. And I totally buy into what you're saying, that we need to work together, really, and I will also work with KCC as well, because I think that is incredibly important. So what I would just like to say, I would just like to take this opportunity on both a personal basis and on behalf of my group to wish you all the best for what role you choose to take, and obviously that would be for your decision. And I would just say to Councillor Cox and Councillor Derek Mortimer, I just got one piece of advice for you, and that's get a back protector. You'll probably need it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. It's very interesting. Councillor Mrs Gooch.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Good evening, everybody. It's a bit sad, isn't it, this time of year? I think it's sad because we are going to lose one or two really smashing councillors that I've had the pleasure of working with. Councillor Butler, I hope I'm embarrassing you, because I think you've been lovely. I mean, come on, let's use some basic language here. But I'd also like to wish everybody who's going to be standing for election, I wish you all the very best. I'm lucky I'm not up this year. I've got another 2 years to go. It's a lot of hard work, and I wish you all, regardless of your party, what your beliefs are, I wish you all the best. Do you know, it's very difficult knowing that this is the last annual meeting that our councillor, our leader, the leader of this councillor, Fran, it is her last meeting. And it's very hard to know what to say, because but I won't not say anything, Councillor Mrs Wilson, because I think we are all in awe of your knowledge and your experience. And from my own experience, you are so scrupulously fair. You always weigh up everything, so I can be in a corner ranting and raving, and you can say, yes, but there is this to consider. I think you've held the council together very, very well, because we are a huge mix, aren't we? We've got some extreme of views. We know that through the local plan. So I would like to thank you, Fran, very much for your leadership. It's been an honour to work behind you very quietly and loyally, I hope. Not that you've needed my help at all, but you've done a darn good job. Thank you. I'll just ignore the sniggering that's going on. I'd like to thank the staff as well. We've got a superb set of staff that work for this council, and we work in a team. We are a team, the staff and councillors together. So I don't go with some of the things is that deliberate intervention, Councillor Harper? Are you agreeing with me by sneezing? I know we've heard it said that, members should be running this council, not officers. Actually, I think members and officers run this council. We work together as a team. We pay our officers to do a skilled job, and they do it darn well. There was something else I was going to say. I can't remember what it was now. Perhaps I'll pop up a bit later and say it. But the one thing I do feel is that what Fran has helped to achieve over the past 2 years that you've been leader. Oh, is it 3? Feels like 2. There's a good... Oh, wow. I know. Time flies when you're having fun. Although there is no overall control of this council, that's been our history over the years. And yet look at the achievements we've made. We've really made some really effective decisions for the good of the borough. No matter what you think, no matter what your views are, this council has survived some terrific challenges, and we've come out of it. And I hope that that collaborative spirit that we all try to work towards will continue regardless of who the next leader is. So good luck, everybody. Thank you, Fran, and good luck to the next leader of the Lib Dem group. Happy days.
Thank you, Mrs Gooch. Now call on Councillor Barnett, leader of the Independent Maidstone group.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, members. I enjoyed that. Like previous speakers, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Mayor on the year he's just had. It's been a wonderful time for him, and I know he's done really well, so congratulations, Malcolm. Also, I'd like to say goodbye to Derek. He's done a lot of work, obviously from when I was a councillor before, and I'd like to wish you a happy retirement, Derek. I can't read my own writing now. I would like to also say thank you to Fran. I've been the leader of the group now for a couple of years. Fran's been a lot of help to me, and so have the other people as well. But apart from that, she's worked tirelessly for the council, irrespective of what party you're in or what you believe. There's no denying what she's done for the council. I also support, by the way, Fran, what you're doing with regards to the rail link, and hope that succeeds. I'd also like to wish everyone good luck who is standing for re-election, which includes me. And also a thank you to all those that are standing down. I'm not going to go on and on because I don't, so thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Councillor Harper.
I think, obviously, everyone's, we've said thanks to the mayors. We should do, and to the officers who actually provide us with the advice and enable the council to function. I think the high-speed train link is really important, and actually, I'm someone who uses it to commute to work. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually delivering the Kent Messenger flyer, and it was interesting. Most of the people on the train weren't even aware of the threat to the train service. But I think as a result of hopefully talking to a number of them on the way up to London, that there were more signatures appeared on the KM petition, but it's vital we all work together to make sure that that service is continued. And I personally know a lot of people, when I spoke to them, who actually did move here and would seriously start to look at leaving Maidstone. If those, admittedly only 3 services a day, but those are withdrawn, I think a lot of people will start to look to live elsewhere. We've obviously, we've talked about retiring councillors, and as John said, he and myself are both facing re-election in May, so this might be, depending on your view, the start of my next session or the last time you might hear from me. So, but I'd like to thank Fran as our leader. I think the work she's done on this council has been really second to none. I've really enjoyed working with her, talking to her on various issues, seeking advice and providing advice occasionally, and looking at where we can find the cooperative spirit amongst ourselves and with all the parties. The strategic leaders meetings we've been having every month give an opportunity for all the 5 group leaders to come together and to discuss stuff, to hopefully see if there's a consensus to take things forward, or where potentially there isn't, to actually see how we might go about designing, building a consensus. And I think a cooperative style council works in the best interest of Maidstone, and I think you only have to think of some of the achievements really over the last year or two to think of that. The local plan. We've got a local plan. Thanet down the road, the government's talking about intervening to put a local plan in. That's because we worked together on a hung council to get it through. The cabinet system, perhaps a bit more controversial with some people, but Fran's overseen it and has steered it into practice, and hopefully is now an established part of our borough. Well, it is for now, anyway. One of the other things, which I'm sure you will all agree with, which Fran's helped with, is overseeing our council approach on housing and our investment strategies, policies which are designed to help us with our long-term issues of homelessness, but also the fact of our reducing government resources. So, investing money to invest for the future. And so really, under her period of leadership, the council has achieved a lot, and she's leaving us, I think, in a good stead for a new leader to emerge, whoever that will be at the council AGM coming up, but also obviously leading Martin in a good position, I would think, within his group to help ensure that the Liberals take a strong part moving forward, as do I and all the other group leaders, I'm sure, intending to do in terms of us moving forward in our cooperative spirit, as I hope to see re-emerge after May the 3rd.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. I will now open up this item to questions from council members for a period of 15 minutes. Questions must relate to the issues raised by the leader and other group leaders in their speeches. They will be answered as directed by the questioner and will not require a response from all group leaders. Annabelle.
I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, it's a bit of a cheeky question, but I do have a question for the Leader of the Council. Why do we have elections every 4 years instead of 3 out of every 4 years? Wouldn't that be a great idea?
No.
You know what? I'm very happy to give you the same response that I've given every time I've been asked this. You move to proportional representation, and I'd be happy to go to 4-yearly elections with immediate effect.
Thank you very much. Well, I've got no other questions at all, so we'll move on then. Item 13, Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee, 6th of February 2018, page 18 to 24. I call upon Councillor Derek Burton to move the recommendations of the... David Burton. Actually, I thought it was your brother.
Tonight, Mr Mayor, I shall be... No. Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's a straightforward matter for you on page 18 of the papers. You'll all be aware that the Strategic Planning Committee looked at matters relating to revision in the way the planning department operates. This culminated in some consideration of proposals. The recommendation from Strategic Planning is that we ask the monitoring officer to make appropriate amendments to the Constitution based upon the decisions from Strategic Planning Committee. For the sake of clarity, because the papers before you are quite comprehensive, it should be no more than on page 21, the amendment set out in the bottom right-hand corner. And I'd just ask that the minutes actually indicate the specific nature of the amendment as we identify it. So we're asking the monitoring officer to make the amendments to the Constitution on our behalf, and I am further advised that at our next meeting we will see a full schedule of all of the amendments to the Constitution for our further consideration. So I move as per the papers.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the sake of clarity, may I just ask a couple of questions on the appendix? On page 20, it was a question about reviewing the parish calling process. The view of the committee isn't... Are you saying that the committee did not support it? The wording isn't quite in line with the rest of the style. I have two other questions. Do you want to do them one by one, or I'll give you the lot? I'll give you the lot. Thank you for that. The next one is on page 23, item D, late representations. Could you just let me know what the committee decision was on that? I don't seem to be able to see that from the papers. And finally, on page 24 again, the request or the recommendation to implement the change to ensure that the committee can only refuse outline planning permission on an allocated site where it is not compliant with policy. I was interested to see that the working group was not minded to pursue this recommendation, and I would like to know the thinking behind that, because as a sub on the planning committee, my understanding is that the committee regulates council policy and, in brackets, government policy. So I'm a bit puzzled by that. So thank you, if I may have clarification on those 3 points. Thank you.
Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, this is indeed what I tried to...
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, this is indeed what I tried to be very specific about the matter in front of us tonight. Tonight, we are only considering asking the monitoring officer to make the changes to the Constitution that the committee agreed. All of those questions that my colleague behind me has asked were covered in a lot of detail during the debate, and I really don't think this is the appropriate forum to actually go back over that. I'd be happy to discuss it privately, and I could refer you to the minutes, and I could refer you to the webcast. But for the purposes of tonight, it is just the matter of the constitutional change.
Thank you. You okay, Mrs. Gooch?
May I just say, Chairman, it was interesting at a meeting, Councillor Paul Harper said, you know, council meetings, they're getting a bit boring. Nobody says anything. Nobody challenges anything. So I thought, I think I'll throw my 4 pennyworth in tonight, and what's come up with, close it down. But I will behave myself for once in my life and say, thank you. If you'd like to direct me to the correct minute, I will look at it. Am I satisfied with the answer? No, frankly. I thought you could have had the decency to ask a simple question. I've got out of bed the wrong side.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Sort of say that should you want to talk to the chairman on this, please do. Councillor English.
I think Councillor Burton's response was simply to the point that there was no reason to discuss that because the committee, strategic planning, refused to take any of the points forward. And so we're only discussing tonight that point that was actually agreed by Strategic Planning Committee, and therefore the constitutional change coming from that. All the other points were not taken forward. Therefore, I don't think Councillor Burton was closing it down. He was just trying to concentrate on the item that's actually on the agenda, if that helps, because all of those other proposals were not taken forward.
Thank you. Councillor English. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations on page 18? Thank you. Is that recommendation agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 14, Communities, Housing, Environment Committee, acting as Crime and Disorders Committee, 13th of February 2018 and 20 March 2018, page 25. I call upon Councillor Barnard to move the recommendations of the Communities, Housing and Environment Committee, acting as the Crime and Disorder Committee, relating to the adoption of the 2013-18 Community Safety Partnership Plan refresh and the 2018-19 Strategic Assessment for the implementation by the Safer Maidstone Partnership and its priority subgroups. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Members, I move to accept the recommendation on page 25 of your papers.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mortimer, thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 15, oral report of the strategic planning. There is no report from the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee. Agenda item 16, notice of motion. I call upon Councillor Brian Mortimer to move his motion relating to pothole repairs.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think tonight's meeting has been quite happy and quite friendly, so I don't wish to bring all the big politics into tonight's meeting. It's your last meeting, Mr. Mayor. And what I propose, Mr. Mayor, is that my motion, after I've read it out and it's seconded, this motion then is not discussed and it goes to the next SP, S&T committee after the elections, where we can have our political battles. So my motion is, Mr. Mayor, in view of the recent press coverage of potholes with the Borough of Maidstone, I'm getting very upset and angry that as a borough councillor, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of many borough councillors, and I failed to put in and officers, at many times we, the borough, are blamed for the bad state of our roads, which, as we are all aware, is the responsibility of Kent County Council. My motion is that we instruct officers to investigate possible options which would include the Highway Act of 1980, Section 42, which would give us the ability to change the existing dire situation. Once that report is complete, it should be presented at the earliest opportunity to the SP-S&T Committee, and the recommendations should then go to full council. That's all I wish at the moment, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Yes. You want to speak? Okay, thank you very much. In accordance with the Council's Procedure Rule 17.4, the motion, having been formally moved and seconded, will be referred to the Strategic Planning and Sustainability and Transportation Committee. The Council may debate the motion. However, since the desired outcome at this stage is the preparation of a report, I do not consider that a debate is necessary this evening. The motion now stands referred to the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee. Thank you very much. And thank you for your being this afternoon. Don't forget, there are drinks in the Beauvais room. I close the meeting. Thank you.
Taken the civic officers by surprise.
Sorry?
I think we've taken the civic officers by surprise. They're not here.
Don't worry. I can bundle out. I want to take Derek.
I'll take it. Someone else.